Okay everyone, wanted to show you something. And I know some of you are going to tell me you knew what the outcome was beforehand. Tamiya cement, I did glue that on with Tamiya cement. This little patch, I already pulled it off in an earlier take. But this little patch stuck, and it stuck pretty good. But the strip was that big, so, you know, about that much of it didn't glue down at all. I'm not going to use Tamiya cement to try to glue that on. I got another idea, kind of an epiphany happened this morning, or what I like to call a light bulb moment, and I'm going to give it a try. So, give me a minute. I need to mix up some Aves. We got some Aves sitting here. Yes, it's quite a bit of Aves. One, Mothra is going to get a skin of Aves today. That's going to be the easy way to take care of his nasty, nasty seamage, and I'm going to do it. I'm just going to Aves up all across his back and then stipple it. So he'll get done. I got another trowel I'm going to try with this real quick, and I got to find, yep, there's the mold I'm going to use. So back in a second, let me get the Aves mixed. Folks, what I have is a nice thin piece of Aves. Okay. I'm cutting it to length. It's not a big piece, you can see that. I'm going to put it on my seam line that I want to scale. Get that to stay. And the problem with Aves is if your fingers aren't wet, it sticks to your fingers more than it does the model. And my fingers are not wet right now. So it's wanting to stick to me, not the model. And I had to get my fingers wet. And I'm off camera, so let's drop the camera a little bit and reposition. Alright, now I'm going to use my standard Aves seam filling technique here and just smear it along there until I think I've got a fairly decent coverage of that seam. And if this doesn't work, I can scrape this right off like I have in the past. It's one of the fun things about Aves. Okay, and I want just a teeny bit more, so I'm cutting off a little bit more here. I'm going to play it sit there. Okay, that should be enough. It's feathered into the parts around it the way I want it. Alright, so what I'm going to do next is I picked a good spot on the mold I made earlier for my monster skin. And I am just going to press this thing into that mold. I'm hoping the Aves will hold it in place. I'm going to let it cure. We're going to let that sit for 3 hours. Let's see what happens. Because I'm having problems getting the skin to mold into the detail around it. This should fix that. I'm putting a lot of force down in there, getting it to mold itself. Oh, and I picked it up. So I got to start that over. I'll be back. Okay, I redid that. I'm really going to set that aside and just let it sit and cure. I'm going to let it sit there. 3 hours, I'll pick it up and see what happened. If it works, great. If it doesn't, I just wasted 3 hours of time and a little bit of Aves. This big blob of Aves has got another use. I'll get to that later. Folks, I want to talk about King Gidrah's necks. All the seam filling I'm worried about isn't on King Gidrah's necks, it's on the tails. Okay? Now I'm not going to use these two necks. You can see there's silver paint on them in places. It's because I'm working on the seams. So let's talk about this one here. That's probably as far as I'm going to go without this thing going massively out of focus. Alright, the underbelly seam. Running along here. I've been working that one pretty hard with a file, and you can see I've almost got that done. That's almost done. There's like a few spots like right along there that needs to be fixed. Okay, the ring around his neck where the two neck pieces join is going to need some work, but I'm going to try something with that. I'm going to hit that with Mr. Surfacer and see if I can get that to hide that way without having to go through all the trouble I'm doing with the tails. And I've actually been thinking about the tails and might try something with them to speed this up a little bit. Now, between the spines on the necks, they're done on all 3 necks. Those came out good. I'm leaving them the way they are. There's really no detail where those spines are, so there's no point in trying to add detail where I don't need to. So, the spines along the top are done. So, what I have left to do on the necks is the ring where the 2 neck pieces join, right along here, and work on the spines of the belly a little bit. Now, we can see on the bigger one exactly what I'm talking about. I've almost got those bellies done. If we look at the tops, I'm moving it back and forth so you guys can see the reflection in the silver. The tops are done. My problem's the ring around where the 2 neck pieces join. And I'm going to try painting that with Mr. Surfacer and then trying to get some detail put in that way. And if I can, then those are done. It just leaves me the tails, the legs, and this big nasty seam along the body right here. I get that done, we're cooking. The wings have some problems too. I've been working on the wings a little bit. Now let me zoom this back out so you guys can actually see me. Okay, let me get a wing real quick. They're in a box. I keep everything in a box because I've got a couple of cats that think it's fun to play with things. Here's one of the wings. What I'm talking about is this join line right here, the seam line right here. I don't even know what they're thinking. Why didn't they just mold this thing in one big piece? I don't know. Okay, but that line right there is going to be hell to get rid of. Good thing though is it goes on the underside. You can already tell this thing's going to be impressive as all hell with that wing on there. It goes on the underside, so it's not going to be all that noticeable. And I'm just going to try to hide that again with some Mr. Surfacer and a few other things. I just want to hide the seam. I'm not going to try to replace the detail because I don't think I can. It's too, yeah, it's just way too detailed along there. Here, let's zoom that in so you guys can see that. You can see exactly what I'm talking about. That scale pattern is going to be hard to replicate. But if I can fill that seam in a little bit, just get it filled in perfectly, you probably really wouldn't notice it that much. Alright? So that's where I'm at currently with the seams on King Gidrah. I'm still experimenting with trying to fill in these tail seams, and I'm beginning to think that they're not such a big deal because the top of this tail may not have that detail along it. Might look okay without the detail along there because the top along here have these spines. Wouldn't it be cool if I could replicate those spines and just stick them along the tail? That's not the way King Gidrah is, though. He doesn't have spines along his tail. So I'm making progress here. It won't take long to get where I can put these wings on and the heads on and then start talking about paint. Laters. Alright, let's see what happened to my experiment over here. Let's pull this off its mold. Okay, now, that is incredibly promising. Let's zoom that in so everyone can see what I just did. Alright, we're going to move it up closer to the camera. You can see that blends into the surroundings perfectly, and that's on there. I think I found my method right there, a hybrid method between a texture stamp and making a skin with a mold. I think that's perfect. I'm gonna let that cure overnight to see what it's like in the morning. Let me pull this back out. I'm gonna let that cure overnight, see what it's like in the morning when it's fully cured. I think with some light sanding, I've got it. That is happiness. Alright folks, we're gonna talk about King Gidrah. My attempt earlier on the tail failed. And it's exactly because you saw that mold jump. When it jumped, the eggs just smeared everywhere. So when you do this, you have to hold the thing in place immediately. I got my strongest holding single-use clamp here. Yeah, that holds pretty strong. That hurts. So, yeah, that's good. No. Anyhow, got my strongest clamp. We're going to try this again. I've cleaned the aves out of my mold. And I cleaned the aves off of the part. Got some aves rolled out right here. And I will let you know what happens.